I'm Miha Ronovic. I'm the product manager of Grid Engine and I work in Sun Microsystems.
My name is Fritz Wessel and I'm the director of the Grid Engine product team.
So I'm going to talk today with Fritz about grid computing. So Fritz, can you explain us what grid computing is? There are many opinion and definition going on in the market. I want to know your take on it.
Well, Miha, you're exactly right. Grid computing is actually an overloaded term. Applications of the term grid can be found in many areas. For instance, generic dynamic service grids, globally connected resource pools, or enterprise or departmental computing grids. But what counts in the end, however, is what customers are actually do with grids. And in all those cases, what grids do for them is boosting productivity, maximizing resource utilization, and simplifying access to needed computing infrastructure.
So basically, grid computing is helping the customers to solve their problem faster. Is that what you say?
Absolutely. Grids mainly do two things for you. So on the one hand, they are making sure that all available resources are utilized in accordance to priorities and workload requirements. And they also provide access to those resources transparently. So users can actually stay focused on their core task and do not have to hunt for resources.
You know, some people say this grid computing is only for universities and research and government. I think there are other interested parties to that, other interested customers. Can you tell us?
Correct, Miha. Actually, grid computing has become a very mainstream technology. I always refer to it as the conveyor belt of modern engineering development and decision support. It has very widespread applications in areas as diverse as designing cars, airplanes, computers, chips, new drugs, in exploring oil and gas fields or the human genome, or in predicting climate changes and risk associated with financial investments.
I think I understand what grid computing is, but about our product Grid Engine, what role does it play in grid computing?
Grid Engine is a very mature compute grid product that brings customers the power of grid computing without having to build a custom infrastructure. Grid Engine features a strong scheduler which has policy-based controls. It is highly scalable, it is very flexible and easy to use, and it supports a broad range of platforms. Instead of just looking at a list of characteristics for Grid Engine, why not take a peek at the visualization of how Grid Engine actually works. So here you have a pool of resources on the right bottom, and users are submitting jobs manually into it. But obviously there is some effort involved in finding suitable resources. It is easy to make mistakes and thereby causing overloading of resources. And there is manual intervention needed in order to make sure the load is well balanced. So in the case like displayed here, where you actually have people leaving during the nighttime and resources are unattended, what happens is typically that you end up overloading certain resources while other resources become completely idle, which is why you end up with pure utilization rates of anywhere in between 10 or 25% as we could observe in practice. Now let's see how that looks if we were to employ a system like Grid Engine. Jobs are submitted by users at the bottom into the Grid Engine system. They are spooled there, and there is a master control unit in Grid Engine that monitors availability and suitability of server resources. It also dispatches the jobs to the best suited resources based on priorities and other policies. So what you get automatically is a high utilization of resources. What you can do also here is you can add a resource, like I'm doing it now. And Grid Engine will automatically recognize that new resource and will send jobs to it. All this is happening transparent to the user, so the user doesn't have to look out for resources themselves, which automatically drives up their productivity. We already see that the CPU utilization is much increased here and that job results are delivered faster. So that translates easily into time to market benefits for customers. So now let's look at a more challenging example, an enterprise grid environment. So what we have here is two departments, each of them owning their own pool of resources. And obviously they both, in this case, would be running Grid Engine, and they both would benefit from what we have said before. But over time there could be varying workload. So for instance, one of the teams could be approaching crunch time for an important project, whereas in the other team people could be on vacation, and thus there could be resources idle on their end. It would certainly be nice if you could take advantage of such idle resources for the high priority project. And that's exactly what the Grid Engine policy module allows you to do. So let's look at how that would be implemented. So what you do there is you combine the two resource pools into one shared pool of resources. And the ownership of those resources is defined by share entitlements. Those are depicted here at the lower bottom by the scale, where 25% of the resources are assigned to team number A and 75% are assigned to team number B. And of course you can also see at the very bottom that on average more jobs are processed for team A than for team B. Once again, that is completely automatic. Users do not have to take care about it, and it also can be changed anytime. So like I'm doing it here, I'm moving this slider for team A from 25% up to over 80%. And Grid Engine will recognize that immediately and will start sending more jobs from team A into the shared pool of resources. Like in the previous case, you could also add resources and Grid Engine would recognize that automatically. And like in the previous case, the users are completely unaware of what's going on there. They just notice that their policy entitlements are being met.
Sounds great, but can you give some actual example, typical cases where Grid Engine is used?
Yeah, let me take the example of Mentor Graphics, which is a software vendor for the electronic design and automation industry, that is chip design industry. They are, for instance, doing all their verifications and tests of their software with Grid Engine, but at the same time also do chip designs which they do custom made for customers on basis of Grid Engine. Then, for instance, a large European car manufacturer who is doing all the crash simulations for their cars on top of Grid Engine. Or take, for example, Rising Sun Pictures, an Australian virtual effects company that was involved in many major blockbuster movies such as Charlotte's Web or Lord of the Rings or Superman Begins.
It seems we are quite popular nowadays. How popular is Grid Engine today?
Grid Engine has over 10,000 grids in production today. If you look at the broad range of customers ranging from companies like Mentor Graphics to Ford to Eli Lilly to Motorola, you can see the kind of adoption that we're getting. And all those customers increase their utilization and their time to market.
So you say increase utilization. Does it mean people are not using the computers completely today?
Absolutely correct. An average utilization that you see in industry is something in the area of 10 to 15% of a server system, and Grid Engine can help you drive that up.
If you want to protect your investment because you bought Grid Engine, but you also have an open source project based on our product. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, actually Grid Engine is open source. The Grid Engine open source project is the source basis for the Grid Engine product. The source is completely open. The license is an accepted open source license. We have a very strong community, and the community actually has developed an ecosystem around Grid Engine, integrating it with a number of solutions in that space.
Well, I've heard there are about 1 million lines of code over there in open source.
Yeah, roughly, that's true.
Okay. So, our customers, where can they go to get a bit more information?
Yeah, I would recommend as a start to go to sun.com/gridbear. That's a good entry point.
Thank you very much, Fritz. It's been very educational.
And thanks for having me.